Thank you. You're far too kind.
Checkity check.
Our faces are back.
I need to turn up the volume a bit. There we go.
I love to see your faces, guys, by the way. I bring the Latin love to the podcast. I always say how much I love you guys, how much I miss you, how much I like you. You see, that's the Latin language speaking through me.
I miss you too, Diego. I miss you every day.
You see? That's your Chilean side being actually transparent with our friendship. That's nice.
Yeah, and then I go, guys, stop being awkward.
Yeah,
I don't even want to know that you have feelings, let alone what they are.
His Anglo-Saxon awkwardness coming in.
Excuse me, I am neither Anglo nor Saxon.
Even worse.
I am Germanic.
Germanic.
He's an Orientalist from now on.
Oh, yeah.
He's purely a Buddhist.
He's one of those Odin worshippers.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I would love to tell you about Svabava, but we're going to pivot because we missed a lot of news. And this
there's been a lot.
Most of the news is just like funny. We got the tariffs and the trade wars, Trump crashing the market, like the worst. Everyone knows this already, but it's just too fun. It's the first time that like one person has caused the crash of a market instead of like COVID or 9/11.
And I kind of find what we're going to talk about today funny too. I don't know if are you implying that it's not funny. I think it's very funny.
I heard it was the biggest market downturn of the Dow
since the 20s.
Yep. Which is a typical. I always feel like it's a typical thing to hear when I go on news binges.
Since the Great Depression.
It's the biggest. No, not since the Great Depression. It's the biggest crash since the financial crisis.
COVID, I thought.
Oh, COVID. Yeah, that's true.
No, I think it's already larger than that.
They said like all time it was the biggest.
This doesn't
ever.
matter. We're gonna move on. I
agree.
The only thing that's potentially changing about this, like the market crashes, which is it just does that. That's a thing. Line goes up, line goes down. But the unthinkably damaging thing that has happened there is the Treasury drop. Because usually when the market drops, then Treasury securities go up, and this time they didn't go up. I haven't checked what they are at this week, but that's like
a disaster.
That changes the future. That changes the hegemony of the American dollar potentially. But
hooray!
I mean, we'll see.
This also may explain Trump's push into crypto and to deregulate crypto. Just as hedging in case everyone flees the dollar as the reserve currency. And
these things are all so boring compared to what we're actually going to talk about.
Hey, crashing the market is bait. If Bernie Sanders had one, he would have to do all the same stuff.
It's boring, though.
Yeah, aren't we all still waiting for the big one? Like, there's ups and downs. 2008, COVID. When's the big one coming? That everything goes.
I think Comrade Trump is going to push us into the future unwillingly.
That's the portal to the future is the downward, the crash. Yeah.
Right, accelerationists. Yeah.
We also never talked about Canada politics. Massive shift. It's completely just based on
the
what
Carn
Trump
boy,
does.
the rise of the Carn.
But let's not go too into detail. But the Conservatives were going to have a majority government, and now they're not. Now the Liberals are they set for majority or still minority government?
Majority.
Last I heard, they were up, but I don't know by how much.
That is just the most insane 180, and it's just because we vote with our feelings, and our feelings are we don't like our Albertan Ron DeSantis nerd. So,
where's Canada again?
That's such a. It's right above the United States.
Yeah,
just as a geography lesson, we share a border with them.
It's kind of big. It's hard to miss.
Yeah, but people are mostly concentrated on very, very small places.
But you saw how Trump thought when he was talking about Canada becoming the 51st state. He looked at it, he's like, look at it. It'd be a beautiful, big thing if it became a... I'm like,
oh my God.
That's the reason you want. Oh, but also like a note on Mark Carney, the very, very likely new prime minister. Totally incidentally, someone like randomly bought me this book like years ago, which is right here. It's Mark Carney's actual book. And I thought it'd be quite funny. Maybe we could cover it on the podcast. Maybe there's something funny in here that we could read. It's called Values. Yeah. It's like his philosophy.
I love both value and values. These are important terms to me.
Yeah.
Cool terms. Yeah.
That's intriguing. Why is the S anyway?
Well, you got Marx for value and Nietzsche for values. And
this guy's doing both.
Yeah. I bet there's a ton of Marx in that book.
I'll bet you that was the publisher, like his editor being like, we need a clever title here. Let's just do it with the
Let's put this S under erasure.
Exactly.
Okay, so what we're covering today is not all the stuff that we just talked about. Maybe we will at some point. But we want to talk about Trump declaring war on universities, because most of us have spent, I think, all of us still in a university? Close enough.
I mean, I'm affiliated
Diego,
with the
you're
university.
taking a degree right now, right?
Yeah, I am.
Quasi.
I am.
Anyway, we've spent a combined like 50 years in a university.
I'm still very affiliated with universities for sure.
Yeah. And we know what's wrong with them, having spent so much time there. And we're going to decide whether Trump knows what's wrong with them. If they're a sickness, I think was what he said on Truth Social. And I love when people say things like sickness, because then you get all the religious metaphors in there. And there's no doubt that universities do some annoying shit. There's no doubt that universities are corrupt, so I'm not crying over here. Eric, at one point on this podcast, did a deep dive into the corruption of his university, where the board had all these ties to a nonprofit, and then all the money was like circled through there for building contracts on campus, building completely unnecessary buildings on campus just because the construction or the builder is like the brother of someone on the board.
Yeah.
So this stuff happens all the time at universities, I'm sure. They're basically corporations, no doubt, and academics with their pursuit of wisdom and free inquiry. That could happen at a university, but it's not guaranteed. But Trump hates all the university, and we agree, generally speaking, as the academic side, that we hate university administrations. Every academic hates them.
Yeah, I kind of hate both sides of this debate, so it's going to be pretty cool.
I agree. I agree. I kind of hate both sides of this debate too.
What are both the sides?
Trump and the universities.
Trump and the university.
In terms of that, yeah. Trump versus higher education.
And the universities that he chose as well.
Yeah, he was selective, yeah.
Yeah, maybe this is going to be a controversial thing to put on the table, but like there were a couple of Trump's demands that I was kind of like, yeah, it's a good idea.
Maybe.
Yeah. Which ones?
Like one or two.
Well,
like I would say.
Should we like preface by setting people on the mood and like telling a little bit of the behind story? And like
we read some New York Times articles here for this. Maybe we should just give them a quick rundown.
I randomly choose Eric to do that.
To give the rundown of what's
random
going on?
selection.
Yes.
Random selection deliberately chosen by Diego.
Totally random. It was determined by previously existing material conditions.
So was it April 11th, right? These demands were sent to Harvard, which included ending DEI and critical race theory, kinds of connected programs and things that are funded. Overall, to reduce the autonomy of the university governance, basically by instituting merit-based hiring practices instead of I guess would you call them like a DEI quota or affirmative action type stuff? Targeting international students, we've been hearing a lot about that, and the deportations, and referring to protests as riots. And
but can I just quickly add that the stick he's using though is like federal funding, right? So he's going to cut federal funding.
I was going to get to that. One broad thing he's done in all of his post-Project 2025 strategies, including this one, is to weaponize federal funding. And those are the basic. That's basically, he's sent these demands by mistake, some say, to Harvard. And I mean, I guess there's similar demands that were sent to Columbia and similar demands he's putting on. But Harvard is also fighting back and suing Trump, being like, we're a private institution, First Amendment, freedom of speech, blah, 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 government overreach. So those are the two sides, Trump's demands and Harvard, like, retaliatory lawsuit.
And can I just for context, I think this is an ongoing fight between the Republicans and the universities versus all these critical race theories and saying that universities are supposedly Marxist hellholes that are forming revolutionaries and whatnot. But I think it was the event that really triggered this direct attack against educational institutions was the predominance of protests in favor of the Palestinian people. and against the genocide that is going on in Israel. I think that was the main trigger, and that detonated into like a completely a defeat in the propaganda war, because I think now the majority of millennials and centennials in the US are pro-Palestinian and against Israel. And I think that is a little bit of context and backdrop to justify why Trump is attacking the universities.
On that point, like in our group chat, Pills assigned a little bit of homework, and I want to be the good boy who, the good student who did his homework. And one of them was he said, focus on like the narratives, I guess. I don't know. I mean, I'm just kind of kidding here. So I was just trying to think to myself, I was like, what are the two narratives? Maybe this isn't even what Pills meant by narratives, but I was thinking to myself, and kind of to Diego's point, I see like the Trump side narrative is like universities are like bastions of left-wing indoctrination, hostile to white and Jewish students, and unaccountable to like the broader public and its public responsibility. And I would say that he's framing himself and like people like Christopher Rufo and all these people as restoring balance and freedom, right? Mm-hmm. Especially for conservative speech. And then I would say that the university's narrative, like Harvard's narrative, is institutions value autonomy, academic freedom, nonpartisan inquiry, and this crackdown is an authoritarian overreach that's like trying to use weaponizing research funding. And they have this idealized vision of the university as like stewards of an independent inquiry. They advance knowledge through academic freedom, and that requires insulation, and they see this as like an infringement on that. Those are kind of like the way that I see the two narratives. I don't know if that's what you're looking for, Pills, but that's what I came up with.
Yeah, I was looking for the mythology. Part of the mythology here doesn't exactly make sense. I'm not really sure why Trump would be, or the closest people to Trump are concerned about anti-Semitism.
Well, this is why to me it's clear, and like not to sound conspiratorial, and it's just so easy when this topic comes up to sound like, like someone who's into Jewish conspiracy theories, but it's just simply true that like the Israel lobby does have a lot of influence in like the Trump administration and both the Democratic and Republican parties, and I just like know it's just almost certain that like in the wake of October 7th, like there's many people in the administration who are like, look, the universities are like contributing to this. You need to do something about this. And they're kind of framing it as like an attack on Jewish students. And then this is leading to these kinds of demands. So like, it's just, and they're funding a lot of election campaigns. And sorry if that makes me sound like a fucking Israel conspiracy theorist, but like that shit just seems true.
I mean, since the war between Hamas and Likud, right, there's been anti-Semitism on campus charges all in the media. Even in Canada, we experienced it here. That's why we're talking about this. We have some experience with it. And those kinds of things, anti-Semitism on campus was like really, trumped up after the war started.
So who knows whether or not Trump himself cares about anti-Semitism. People around him might. People around him might, but also there's so much in this of like Rufo. We read Rufo a while ago, and he's the big woke
culture
DEI
warrior.
Mind virus is taking over these universities, and we need to cleanse and purge them. But I think one of the things is funny because the demands were to purge your departments that are known for anti-Semitism, including like Middle Eastern studies, South Asian studies, I believe, and Harvard Divinity School. And by the way, the Harvard Divinity School, it's probably like 200 or 300 years old, I'm sure, and Protestant. So I'm sure they did
one of the oldest.
They did some anti-Semitism. There's no doubt about that.
It was an endowment from the late 1700s by some British trader or something. It's a permanent endowment, so they can only ever use that endowment money to re-up that divinity professor position. So that's why it is still there, because like permanent endowments, you just have to keep using them for their original purpose, even if it's 200 years old.
But let's keep going into this a little bit, because first of all, this is the administration and the university lawyers that are dealing with Trump. These are not academics. So
Correct.
Do they care about academic freedom? They kind of have to for like brand purposes. But if we compare now Columbia University to Harvard. Columbia University, storied school. A lot of the greats went there or went through there. It's reputable. And Trump says, you guys have to stop funding the South Asian Studies Department and surveil your students better because anti-Semitism. And Columbia, this prestigious center of learning, just goes, yes, sir. We'll get right on that. And now this, like, not to be too self-righteous here, because this is probably the right move. You just say to Trump, yes, we're going to get our best people on it, sir. And then you don't really have to do anything because he just wants the nod. And then you get your billions of dollars of funding.
You kiss the ring and you continue as usual.
And the academics who are getting funded continue to get funding. No one lose their jobs. But you look like a dog for capitulating. And I think Harvard, whether or not they certainly could follow suit. But I think this is like so damaging to your reputation as an independent center of learning, and then just to capitulate to a complete clown who actually, well, Trump did have a university, so maybe he actually does know what he's on about here.
When I was doing my homework on this, I wanted to do Marx, Lacan, and Deleuze on as a framework to address this topic. But I think Deleuze we can probably leave if we have time because it's the least interesting.
Wait, what? We think you have time for Marx and Lacan?
Yeah. Well,
only have time for two.
I did in my homework. So the quick question that I found very interesting when applying the Marxist critique of even the relationship between ideology, what's the role of academia in perpetuating the existing ideology, and Trump's movement is very interesting because now the way I see it is that, okay, wait. So Harvard, as a university within capitalism, it's another company. It behaves as another company. I think even one of you guys said in the chat that if Harvard traded in Wall Street, it would be trading between the top 500 companies. It's full of money, full of endorsements, is washing money everywhere, evading taxes. So it's a big company. So we know it's actually a company, but it's supposed to be working as a university, as an academic institution. But regardless, if we take the Marxist analysis, the role of institutions is to perpetuate the existing ideology. So what Trump is doing is weird to me because in a way is okay, if capitalism has this intrinsic characteristic of being ever expanding, like this in a globalist neoliberal trend of tearing down whatever resistances it have, it melts everything into solid, into thin air. So capital as this ever expanding growth strategy, it's more represented in Harvard than in Trump. And according to me, what Trump is doing, it's more I don't know if he's being anti-capitalist by punishing the freedom of an institution that is perpetuating the ideology, the religion of capital. Because let's be honest, what Harvard does is the supreme church of capital. Even if in the humanities or whatever they do that is supposed to be left-leaning, everything is the church of capital in Harvard. So Trump, by censoring them, it's a weird move. So my end conclusion, and I wanted to hear from you guys, is that, okay, so what is Trump doing in the relationship between universities perpetuating the currently existing ideology?
Well, that's interesting. I feel like that's so much deeper than I was gonna go. I think in a way, to me, I guess, okay, my first reaction to that is I feel like that analysis is sort of premised on the idea that everyone knows that material conditions are what matter. And I don't think that's true. I think many, many people, especially in this American political moment, actually think that the culture war is what matters more. So you and I could agree that they're wrong about that, but it's also just true that that's what they believe. So they think the front line.
It doesn't matter what they believe. That's a cool thing about being a materialist.
But their behavior is still gonna I think so. Maybe we do disagree then, because I think their behavior is gonna be like Christopher Rufo. I don't think that his behavior is necessarily it's gonna be mediated by material conditions, but he really thinks that stopping DEI and wokeness matters the most, right? That's what he thinks matters the most. And I think there's also some short-term thinking going on here where right now Trump and the conservatives see, we won this last election because we had advertisements that said, you know, she's for they, them, Trump's for you and me, right? That worked. Like, let's keep attacking this because that's what's going to win us the next election if we can put all this wokeness stuff on the defense. So, like, I don't think that they're thinking that long term, that big picture. They're just like, people don't like wokeness. Attacking wokeness won us the election. Universities are seen as part of this elite woke discourse. Let's attack the university. That's going to win us brownie points. Like, I think it's as simple as that.
Yeah. But I also think it connects back to the way Pills was talking about religion last episode. In a way now, religion as ideology, it's working as a stabilizing agent. And, and this recoil to previous belief systems, it's an intention for stability. That was my reading.
I think you're onto something, but you're being a little too simplistic with it. Like, who's capital and who's anti-capital? I think this is more like capital versus capital.
I also think it's capital versus capital.
I was going to say that, yeah, and I think a helpful concept would be like hegemony, right?
It's two elite factions. One, I don't know if you call it like, you could call
globalist
it something like
versus sovereignist.
Well, you could call it something like new money versus old money, but like, because he's got the tech people, he's got the new conservatives.
Yeah,
they're trying to get their piece of the pie. And Harvard and Columbia kind of represent like Democrat, old money, even like Bushism.
Yeah.
I looked at it as Pills did, and I think I agree with Diego, but yeah, they're competing models of capitalism that you can sort of loosely group under like the right wing and the left wing. Mm-hmm. and Trump's right wing version is different than the previous ones, right? Like the neoconservative different kinds of traditional. So he's fighting against like a kind of liberal creep, as they sometimes call it.
Yeah.
And he's fighting against like a different conservative model that's been much closer to the interventionist kind of George Bush style conservatism, which Trump wants to reverse, which is why all the war hawks are going over to the Democrats. And this attack on the universities, I think it serves various purposes. I don't think we can just look at it. Even, what does Trump care about? Does he care about who cares what he cares about? Because like Diego said, his beliefs don't matter.
Don't matter.
Right? His behavior is determined within the horizon of capitalism, and he is looking at the ideological front. Harvard doesn't produce anything. It's not a productive entity. But it is an ideological state apparatus, I guess you could call it. And remember, it's a private institution, but Althusser said that doesn't matter if it's a private institution or a public institution. It's still an ISA, right? So he's just taking it to the hegemony side, right? And so, the anti-Semitism stuff, right, that serves other purposes that are closely allied with Netanyahu. The NDEI, the attacks on LGBT and transgender women in university sports, and like the motherhood stuff, that's another block of the ideology there, right? And you can see that in the university attacks, limiting immigration, targeting immigrants, targeting radical ideologies. That's another block, another front of his attack, right? These are all just, whether or not he believes in any of these things or cares about any of these things, they're justifications or framings, right? And that's what we were looking at with the news too. Are there counter framings going on here in the New York Times? Not really. They just refer to it as a culture wars. We're back in that old myth of succession. But and then obviously Fox and the media that's more likely to be Trump friendly is saying, Harvard is rejecting very reasonable demands.
But isn't it also notable that like none of the STEM stuff is being attacked?
Oh yeah,
right?
it's
so, like,
ironic, isn't it?
All the tech bros are obviously behind Trump, and they're like, the STEM work is important. Like everything that's in STEM is.
But they're not behind Trump because of the tariffs now, right? And the timing is super important. Columbia, my theory is that Columbia must have collapsed when things looked very different. Harvard, yes, is a much richer institution, but they also decided to push back at a later date when, it's so obvious now that the tech bros, at least as far as Elon Musk represents them, are on their way out of the center of influence because Tesla is fucked and the Doge is insane and everyone knows it now. And Musk is making his graceful exit with trying to save as much face as possible.
I was gonna say also that the thing about the budget and the endowment, like, because Pills earlier you asked, like, Columbia didn't resist. Columbia's endowment is a measly 14.8 billion, with an important detail: 36,000 students total. Okay,
And Harvard?
and Harvard is their endowment is 51 billion for 20,000 students.
Wow, for half.
Yeah. So
That's
it's
insane.
So
Harvard is wealthier than the wealthiest 4 Americans. It's the world's
Fuck.
wealthiest like public university, I believe.
It's not a
or
public university, but
Private
yeah.
university.
I don't want to get too into this, but you can't like directly pull from your endowment to fund research projects and things like that. So I know it's like, oh, they have all this money, but their money is like assigned to other stuff, and then but they need the budget. If you get a grant,
like the
'cause you're
divinity
like,
chair we mentioned.
But they do.
That's
But
a
they do
permanent
also.
endowment. They can only ever use the money to re-up that chair.
Oh, but they do also have like a hedge fund, like that.
Oh,
Like,
yeah,
that
yeah.
makes them more money.
No doubt.
Well, yeah, they're worth like 900 billion, I think, total assets. The endowment is just the whatever 50 billion endowment. That's what they have, and it's a combination of permanent endowments, so strings always attached. Temporary endowments, strings attached for a while, then they can use it for whatever they want. And then there's just endowments, right? They just come through the foundation wing, that private foundation wing that universities love to have, and the board then decides how that money and its proceeds are used.
I absolutely love my position in this podcast as the guy that like throws wild theory out there, and then you guys with the proper education like ground me and find the nuances in what I said. I absolutely adore it. But I want to just taking the advantage of my ability to stretch. I just want to say this: it's almost as if there's a self-aware mechanism within the logic of capital that knows that the excess in the stretchability of liberalism, the metaphysics of liberalism, what was impeding the growth of capital. You know, it's as if so capital will go as a flow of water, like whatever there's least resistance and more ability for self-reproduction. And like this self-awareness of least resistance and ability to replicate itself. And wokeness was now becoming a cost for capital, was becoming a burden for capital. It's as if this is like capital itself turning itself down a little bit so it can continue to exist, because that path was already becoming a jeopardy for capital globally.
Can you explain how wokeness stops capital?
Yeah, in the sense that it became like, for example, a problem for self-replication. It didn't, like in the 90s and in the early 2000s, everything that was connected to this sense of humanities and helping others was this explained at the sense that when you buy a coffee in Starbucks, you're already paying for the guilt. You know, so like wokeness, greenwashing, pinkwashing, purple washing was already assuming the guilt in consumption and charging it to you. And that model worked for like a decade or two. But now it seems like the guilt is no longer enough to justify the cycle and the expansion of consumption.
I guess I kind of see it differently. I don't really think that wokeness has anything to do with capital's own movement. It has to do with the people who are in power in the structure. They need to feel that they're doing good things while they're not.
Yeah, so it actually helps capital, I would say, often.
Yeah.
But then you get the Trump faction, the Trumpists,
The reaction.
the people that all, like every single Trump supporter already hates Harvard. So they're gonna be appeased by this. They are left out of success, abundance. They've been left out for a long time.
But
and then
this is what
here's
is
a guy.
really contradictory. This is what is really contradictory, because 97% of the wealth of the country, it's in half of the billionaires in the capitalist class in the US. And these are the people that are going to Harvard and Columbia. You know, like this is what is really weird. Like the working class, of course, they hate Harvard. They will never go there. Like they couldn't care less about it. But the issue is that it's like when you say there's two wings of capital competing against itself, like I don't see it. Like the capitalist class is very small. Like there's a bunch of people with no class consciousness, which is different. But the capitalist class is actually very, very small.
But doesn't that tell you like
No, I meant
actually,
there's two branches of capitalist ideology, maybe not individual
capital itself.
members of a class.
The more I think about it, the more I'm starting to feel persuaded that, like, within kind of capitalist incentives, there's like disagreement about like how, like, to put it really simply, like, how are we going to be rich? Are we going to be rich in like this globally interconnected world, or are we going to be rich in like in the United States as American, where we get to be like church going people, or something like that? I don't know. Maybe that doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
but I guess
the
like
protectionist.
Yeah, the protectionist, exactly. It's like, are we going to be rich like alone over here, or are we going to be rich? And like that does seem like there's maybe a disagreement among capitalists.
Which is the other side of the coin of the anti-interventionist thing is protectionism. That's the other side of the coin. And universities doing those attacks on the international students serves a couple different purposes again, right? Because you can say, oh, they're radicals. We need to ideologically vet them to make sure that they are comply with American values. Yeah. That's part of his demands and sort of the broader Project 2025 vision of all American institutions, not just the Department of Education, but all of them, Trump-friendly people with good American values, right? And that's so this like sort of conformity and ideological vetting type of thing he wants to put in there. But yeah, that's another side of that coin, right? Like universities are not for educating people's kids and then sending them back to their country and we lose their intellectual capital, right? It's for educating Americans right here in America kind of thing, right? I think that fits. That's the vision there. At least that's the framing of it, right? You can frame it in different ways, and I think it's connected to those issues anyway. That's why I say this is like you got to look at the menu and be like, okay, there's all these things we want to do. What's next? Okay, something at the Department of Education. Okay, all right, let's hit the anti-Semitism button, the LGBTQ thing. How do we get people worked up about that? I'll run something on the transgender women in sports. That'll get people upset, and then we can do this. Okay, what's next? Traditional family values. BLM. Let's show kids a video about how BLM is like a criminal organization that promotes anti-police sentiment, and all that. It's just like a menu. They just select, how it's the framing today. What's the researchers say these things resonate with the people we want to resonate with. Okay, blah 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 blah. Like it has nothing. Yeah, that's how I'm kind of imagining it in a weird metaphorical way that these things are going.
The rich people's kids they're going to Harvard, Yale, and Columbia.
Yeah.
But these rules and stipulations, they don't target those people. Like if you have a university, it's like 0.05% that are doing cultural studies, gender studies, those kinds of things. They have to identify this as being representative of the university as a whole. So I do find it interesting that the lawyers, administration, board, they are saying to Trump, no, we're not going to do this on behalf of those 0.05% of their faculty or whatever it is. So I don't know. It's almost like they actually do believe in the university mission, or at least they say they do, because this would be very damaging to their brand if they were just to say yes to Trump's demands.
Yeah.
Well,
I was going to say
there's that word again, believe what they believe in. It's without the psychological tones, I would agree. Because like I said, I think it's just that Harvard just refused when things looked different. Columbia caved when things looked like they were going in a different direction. And now
I think you're being a little cynical to just think that Harvard is a corporation that only cares about making profit. Because if they were, this would be fine. They don't need these 5 people. They can say yes.
Well, I would look at the beliefs, I guess, according to ideologies like we were talking about earlier. And like, what's the hegemony that the university represents right now? And what does Trump want it to be? And what are like maybe other models of what what kind of ideology do I want coming out of the university system here? And like, who's there and might agree with me, and who's preventing me? Like, who might be out of line with my direction and vision of things, right? So that's why, they're dragging the presidents of universities in front of, like, who is that other one that got canned, right? Like, this was
Claudine Gay, like, plagiarized something.
Mm-hmm.
Like sending a message basically saying, you can't, do whatever you want. We can get to you, right? We can change your administration if we want to, right? Which is the message he wants to send also to the Federal Reserve. He wants to send it to every major institution that, like, we control you. Right now, it's just withholding funds, but eventually it's going to be more direct.
Yeah, I think that's the cool part of this story. Like, it takes away the clothing of universities and just reveals them as what they are, mercenaries. I think Columbia was the quicker mercenary, and Harvard is probably going to negotiate a little bit more. But in the end, they respond, they're mercenaries. They're up for sales.
That's what I don't see it. Like, Harvard suing Trump.
Suing Trump?
Yeah,
As a company.
Well, as cynical as I can be, Trump's demands to Harvard don't harm their bottom line. Like, this is what I'm still saying. It doesn't harm their bottom line. Okay. They could capitulate, but as cynical as I can be, because you're saying, well, this is revealing what they are. I'm saying people still act like they believe in something like academic freedom because they said no too far. Now, as cynical as I can be is to say, well, this is a branding decision for them, because if they were to just
best for us.
But I still, I have more faith that there's something more than that, that some people in the universities, even in the administration that we all hate, some of them believe in freedom. Something like academic freedom, free inquiry.
I agree. I totally agree. It's so uncommon for you to be the optimist on the panel here, Pills.
He's a Buddhist now.
I would not call this optimism. True. I would call this, like, you're painting thousands of people.
It's not optimism, but it's a certain kind of
centrism. It's centrism.
Well, it's a certain kind of resistance to, like, the most cynical take.
I thought like, it was going to be Team Tank Top.
But that's just because. But you're totally right. I mean, I entirely agree with you. I think, like, the cynical take can only get you so far, and I just think, like, it's just true. There are a lot of people in the university who believe in these things. I think. I think that's true. I totally think that's true. I think that, like, I agree. The most cynical take, I think you hit the nail on the head, is, like, to look at this the most cynically. It's like, it's bad for the Harvard brand if they capitulate. Like, so that's like a self-interested decision. It's like their brand would look bad if they just capitulate to, like, someone who's seen as a proto-fascist.
Maybe it's cynical to say, okay, they're looking at their brand, they're looking at their public image, but I don't think the lawsuit, you can't say Harvard is standing up to Trump because they're thinking about their image. It's like a standard thing, this is a different kind of cynical, right? They sued Trump because that was, like, the best course of action, right? Like, they're in such a good position to win immediate gains from that. And then to be fully resolved is going to take years and years, and it's going to end up in the Supreme Court in years. And those Supreme Court judges are then going to have to decide whether this is a conflict of interest, because they were fucking educated at Harvard too. And so are the lawyers, and everybody Harvard has its own law school, right? They can like do all this in-house. But anyway, no, it's not about public image, and it's not about grand beliefs, valorizing education. It's just like, this was the best move, right? They've attacked us, and would take the cultural temperature and say, okay, now's the time to move. Instead of capitulating, let's try this, right? Because Columbia probably considered the same options and decided against it because they thought they might not have been as well positioned. Harvard obviously thinks it's well positioned. And all it really wants to do, the purpose of this lawsuit, is just to stave off the attack. It's just, if they did nothing, that would be ridiculous. So they did something, because obviously the Trump administration is in a position this time where they have less boundaries and less holding them back from doing what we want to do compared to the last time around, but they're still shit at it and making humongous mistakes, and their messaging is completely self-contradictory, i.e. some people say it was the demands were sent by mistake. How do you mistakenly send a draft that people signed, a signed draft, like who's ever heard of that, accidentally sent to the person that you were not supposed to send it to, plus like all the other leaks and crazy shit that's going on.
I think that's obviously just a lie that they sent it by mistake because they pushed back.
Sure, but it's a mixed message. That's all it is. It's still a mixed message. Whether or not it's true, it's a mixed message. It's out there. There's some people saying this and some people saying that, and they appear to be from the same team saying opposite things or sending mixed messages, explaining the facts differently, like the Beatles, right? They always explain the same story completely different ways.
I'd be remiss if I didn't mention what's actually like what's very sad about this, because you might think, oh yeah, we're poor, we're never getting into Harvard. Good, go fuck you. But something else that happened last week was Linda McMahon, WWE star Linda McMahon, said that right before Rufo gets his way and they dismantle the Department of Education, she said we're going to refer all student loans that are in default to debt collection.
My God.
Which is, I don't know. That's
insane.
That affects, I think, like 50 million people was the number I saw, which is, I don't know. That's just cruel. It's
ending
evil.
loan forgiveness was on the list of things that they sent.
You guys have more student debt than credit card debt. You guys.
That's Americans
the
more
US.
than Canadians.
Sorry, the US. Sorry, my bad. Soon.
If you look at the weirder elements of Trump supporters, you get the sense of where the myth comes from, the myth makers around the Trump brand. And the best I could come up with is like a succession myth, like Trump is like Zeus and Biden in the old order is like Kronos or something. And he wants to like castrate the old order to give you a Lacanian way. And he's threatening the system with castration is what he's doing. The new gods are taking over, and they're protectionist, anti-interventionist libertarians.
I feel like I should say, because I said at the beginning of the episode, like one of Trump's demands that I kind of liked. So I feel like I should probably just like share that. I don't know.
What is it?
Which one is it?
Well, it's like ending DEI and hiring. Like I'm for that. I think like as someone who's been on the job market like right now, I think like having to write a DEI statement, it's just so stupid and redundant.
You have to write a DEI statement?
Often for many positions, you have to write like explaining like how you'll contribute to diversity, equity, and inclusion in the university. And I
do you call yourself Latinx on applications?
There's a box to check. Yes, I do. Of course, I'm fucking gaming the system as best as I can. But I'll say that like the reason why, like I just find it objectionable and redundant, because like when I write my teaching statement, I think like good pedagogy means making students feel included, making everyone feel welcome, like they have a part. Like you cover that in your teaching statement. So it's like then you have to do this other thing. And I do, like maybe this is going to sound hyperbolic, but I do see it as like an ideological litmus test. It's like, are you fully on board with intersectionality and all this stuff? That's basically what it is. And I do think it's inappropriate and I disagree with it. So that's my most anti-woke feeling about the university.
I completely agree with you. And I think it's absolutely fine to say, I have criticisms of the higher education system, very harsh criticisms of it. And I'm glad there's change coming. I just do not agree at all with the purposes or the ways that these changes are being brought about. And I simply don't agree with all of the changes either. And some of the changes I agree with, that is something that should be changed. But the way that they want to change it and the way they're going about changing
obviously
it is
it's
the
absurd.
complete fucking opposite. Like,
Of
don't
course.
centralize control of the universities under the president and then centralize the control of all the universities under the president of the United States, right? That is stupid. Get rid of the governors, get rid of the boards of governors and the investors and all the business fucks that make all the decisions, and bring in collegial governance, empower the senates, empower the departments to make their own decisions and autonomy. We're going in the complete opposite direction of that. Just like DEI is a ass covering mechanism, right? It's a butt covering mechanism. They can say, well, this guy was racist, but according to our form, he's not a racist, right? We gave him the personality test and everything, and he came out not racist. So we're clear, right? We're not on the hook for this. Great. Okay, send him to jail. Send off. Where did Hyde go to university? Oh, who fucking cares? He signed a DEI thing when he got in there.
We checked and he's read and agreed with Kimberly Crenshaw. Look,
Again, it's another version of ideological vetting, like asking
that's the thing.
International
that's the thing
students if they agree with American values. That's just another version of DEI.
That's what I find so objectionable, is like it gives that, but like there's a lot of, I think, academics who are in denial about that. But I do think, and actually it's funny, I was doing interview prep because I did an interview for this job that I didn't end up getting, but I did some interview prep with one of my professors, and I found out that like in our department, like when we do interviews, like there's a question literally on the preliminary interview that's, what does diversity mean to you? Like, what kind of a trap bullshit question is that? Like, that is like that's literally just a trap. That is an ideological trap. That's like to check to be
Rorschach
like,
test.
It's a Rorschach test, and like it's like if you hesitate, it's like then they can see, oh, you're probably a conservative, and like we don't want you here. Like if you hesitate for a second, and I just find that to be totally
read your
inappropriate.
body language.
Yeah, I bet you they don't. Well, if you're applying for a job at the law school, I doubt you'd have to answer that question.
To that. Yeah.
But these attacks, when they've created these associations, say when the Trump administration wants to do X or Y, whatever they want to do. So they create these associations, right? Like DEI, whatever it is, wherever it originated, it's okay. DEI is going to be mentioned in the same sentence as critical race theory, which is going to be mentioned in the same sentence as Marxist radicals, which is going to be mentioned in the same sentence as foreign funding, all these things, right? So they just try to create these completely arbitrary sets of associations, right? Which is the fun thing. So Sir taught us about language, is there's a lot of arbitrarity in there, and you can just try to create these mental associations. And that's just the hegemonic strategy.
The funny thing my professor said, I was like, does anyone ever answer that question well? Like, what is diversity? And she admitted, she was like, not really.
Yeah, like, no, it's a trick question.
So I'm like, why are you guys like, what are you doing? Like I didn't say that to this professor, but I was just like, why are you doing this then? Like, what's the point?
We'd like to see you suffer.
This is the thing that drove Peterson insane. Exactly.
My God.
But if we're talking about like to consider
DIE.
to consider like wokeness as a religion, this is the kind of rituals that belong to it. Is
yes,
there's, it's not a law to put your pronouns in your email signature,
but it's very.
But it would be really good if you did.
But if you want to belong, you have to.
Well, it's a signal. It's a signal.
Be cooler if you did.
It's not a law to give a land acknowledgement, but you probably should. It kind of belongs to the HR section of the university, which is the most, it's more woke than the departments.
Yeah. I recently learned, because I saw this, like I was looking at a colleague's like website, they're on the academic job market, and I noticed that they had something which I'd never seen before, which described themselves as a settler scholar. And I had that reaction. I kind of laughed. I was like, okay, like settler scholar, like what kind of new like woke thing is this? But then a colleague explained to me that there's actually a legit good reason for having it, especially because this person works on indigenous issues in politics. Okay. So like the thing is, so like it actually plays a function where if you're working on indigenous issues, it's a way of making clear I'm not indigenous, basically. Because there can be like a weird thing, and it's happened in the past where like white people kind of like adopt and co-opt and pretend to be indigenous when they're like really into indigenous issues. Yeah. So like I can at least respect that there's like it's playing a function. It's not just like pronouns or just like something that like doesn't, or like having a land acknowledgement in your email where it's really just like virtue signaling. It seems to play a role here. And also like the person too who like did it, it's like they're definitely white, but like they kind of have dark hair and dark complexion, and it's like it's like possible if you saw them you'd be like, oh, maybe they're indigenous.
3% Apache. Yeah.
I wanted to read Trump's Truth Social, and it's laden with religion. This is his post. Perhaps Harvard, this is after Harvard pushback, perhaps Harvard should lose its taxes exempt status and be taxed as a political entity if it keeps pushing political, ideological, and terrorist-inspired sickness.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Just whatever. Harvard as a terrorist supporting institution.
Yeah, I think the religious myth here that they're trying to enforce is that if you want to be an American, you have to be pro-Israel.
You know, it's exactly the same thing, but reversed as what Hitler did when he says to all the universities, you guys, we're gonna do some anti-de-Jewification.
Oh
Yeah, a purity, something about purity.
This is how Heidegger became rector.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah. And that's, you know,
Definitely.
I think that's the broader liberal principles that are under attack here are the independence of these kinds of institutions, right? Like, obviously, the Federal Reserve independence is very important for the global market, especially because the US dollar is like the global reserve currency. So you don't want, you know, whatever administration comes in, you don't want them to be able to just like fire and hire whoever they want. Like some central banks are very much under the control of whatever administration is in power. And then it becomes very politicized and very unstable because it changes, especially in democracies where things are changing all the time, right? Same with the universities, right? Like, you know, all those aren't just empty phrases about free speech and academic freedom and all those things, right? They mean something within a liberal framework. They do, and they're good things as far as they go sometimes. But then they become politicized, and we lose the essence of the issue. Like, we are a settler colonial nation. We came here and did. I mean, I don't mean to say we, but like, you know, the European colonization should be taught because it's history, but then it becomes, you know, this political football, and we start looking at the antinomies of free speech. Well, is hate speech free speech? And then you get into these fucking metaphysical antinomies around these subjects, and you go nowhere because they've been politicized and desubstantialized, right? And dehistoricized. And then we just talk about what they mean in the infinite system of signs that they're supposedly getting their meaning from, the structure of their position in whatever. But it is insightful because, you know, I guess Barth, you know, in his mythology and other texts distinguishes between the denotation and the connotation, right? The denotation is just like the substantial thing that the word is pointing to. But the connotation, that's the big part, right? Because that's like the associative network that word exists in. And certain words, you know, you create associations through repetition, and then the connotation becomes that, right? So, you know, a connotation can shift from BLM being a Black Lives Matter movement to BLM being an anti-police criminal organization if the ideologists of the Trump administration can get their way, which interestingly, I had to mention this because it is related to education, but it is not higher education. It's primary education. Because some PragerU, right? They've put out these models for K to 12, and they have all these educational videos, which are pure narratives. They're amazing.
Pure ideology.
They're hilarious, and oh my God, some of them are just totally ridiculous. Like, you know, you can get a sense of what they want to convince you, even just by like a summary of the narrative. Like,
it's actually interesting. It's interesting you mentioned that because yesterday I was listening. I went on my first bike ride of the season because it's starting to get nice here in Toronto. And the nerd that I am, I listen to Supreme Court oral arguments when I'm riding. And they just did this case. It's like Mahmoud versus something, and it's about like people complaining their children in schools have to like read LGBT like propaganda according to their their perspective, and like most of it was like bullshit. It was like, you know, like some story about like Uncle Bob like marrying a man, and it's like, okay, like relax, like that's a normal thing that happens in life. But I will say, like in passing, there were like a few things that they mentioned that children were being exposed to that I did find that I did feel like I did feel like the religious parents had, sorry, my cat's meowing at me, that like the religious parents kind of had a point, like was inappropriate. Like, so for example, there was one that was like teaching like 8-year-olds and 7-year-olds that they should be resisting heteronormativity at all times, and they should be resisting norms. And I'm like, that is not appropriate. Yes, it's in the record that there's like a storybook that like from like this LGBT alliance about like, you know, helping children like challenge, like you should be challenging. And I'm like, 7-year-olds should not be challenging norms. They need to be learning norms and fucking behaving themselves. Okay.
Wasn't
like
that
like before,
something like
and then the
Project 16 something, or there's some,
and there was like, and I think there was like one other thing about like, I can't remember what the other one was, but there were like 2 things that they mentioned at least that I was like, dude, that's like pretty like that. Like I might even be pissed if like that they were teaching that to my kids. Like, of course, stories about like Uncle Bob and like the fact that gay people exist and can love each other. Like, of course, sorry, conservatives, like that's a real thing that happens in the world. But like to try to take, I think the thing that I object to is like to try to take like pretty controversial and contestable academic concepts and try to cram them down the throats of like 6-year-olds and 8-year-olds. Oh yeah, I remember what the other thing was. It was like a story that involved a thing about how like the doctor takes the child out and it just decides arbitrarily that it's a woman or a boy. That it's just like that I forget what the term in like gender theory is, but it's like, you know, when it comes out, you like discursively, like that really all gender and sex are, it's discursive. And I'm like, that's a complicated, controversial thing that 6-year-olds and 7-year-olds don't need to be like learning about. Like, that's a complicated thing.
Is it too...
6-year-olds are reading Judith Butler?
It's like a a child storybook version, according to the oral arguments. I mean,
That's
I need to go.
I'd have to ask questions about that.
Baby comes out of mommy, and the doctor discursively declares it's gender.
Yes, it's a declare. They just declare it, and it's actually flexible, and that you can be whatever you want. And they're just saying that, and it's temporary. And I'm like, that is fucked up.
We have to get rid of doctors. Yeah.
I wonder how many states added that to their official curriculum versus PragerU, who has been in Oklahoma, Texas, and Florida, have all signed on, right? The reach is much higher, right? I mean,
of course.
As an aside, this is the worst part of polarization, right? Is because each side takes the most extreme and non-representative examples of bad behavior from each side and holds them up like, and it talks about them in the present tense, like this is something that is done regularly. Yet they're just pumping out. There's some factory out there pumping out books about gay marriage just all the time. No, there's nothing that's like an anomaly, but it's held up as, you know, that's why you're hearing all this shit about campus protests and anti-Semitism, and you go there, you think it's like a slaughterhouse, then you go there and there's fucking crickets. Nothing is happening. It's business as usual. You can take these, you know, it's called the representative bias, whatever. Anyway, that's how connotation works. But you know, this PragerU videos are amazing, and these have been like, this material can be used in a classroom according to the school boards of the states. I don't think the individual places are really agreeing with them, but here's one. Los Angeles, Mateo backs the blue. Oh my God, you can see where this is going. A young boy whose family fled to Los Angeles to escape drug cartels in Mexico sees crime on the rise due to Black Lives Matter protests, which he compares to crime spurred by cartels in Mexico. You know, that's part of the narrative of this video that's aimed at K to 12 children. Okay, so they're teaching them that anti-police sentiment, teaching them to be pro-police, right? Or another one, fossil fuels, right? Someone about a kid who stands up for fossil fuel companies. Another one about Western values. Compares the British colonization of India and eliminating the caste system to the spread of Western values, and like the British brought prosperity and success to India as a result. No giant massacres or anything like that happened. They got rid of the caste system because that's the one that promotes Western values. They even have one for us. Little Jimmy or whoever it was had to go to the States and use their superior private healthcare system because our public healthcare system is so gummed up it doesn't work properly, right? Like it doesn't bankrupt anybody who gets a fucking cold, so it must not be working properly is the message there, I guess. Not really. Green energy in Central Africa, we don't have the parts for these stupid plates. Bring in the oil instead, right? Like all these, and this is on K-12 shit, and that's got reach. So I don't know about like Daddy's New Friend book, how many curriculums that made its way onto, but this shit, this far right craziness, this is all perfectly neoliberal. Diego said, where's the capitalism? It's right fucking here. Fossil fuel, right? Anti-green energy. It's just a version of capitalism that these people want. Anyway, again, rant over.
But it's. I mean, I agree with you. I mean, like the reason I thought about my example was because it's like a mirror image. They're just like mirror images of each other in a way.
Let's end on a fun note here.
I agree.
I've sent you guys a list.
What the hell is that?
Okay, this is the banned word list.
But who created this?
It's allegedly the White House or some people in the White House.
Okay, allegedly.
This is fun.
What the banned word list has on it is if your grant application or any of your research has any of these words in it, it's just automatically denied. They probably just ask ChatGPT, did you find any of these words in the application? And then it's immediately rejected. So what's on the banned word list? I want you. There's some good ones.
There are some very good ones.
Gay.
Inclusive.
Gay is banned.
Inclusive. No, all inclusive.
You can't say inclusive.
And you cannot say all inclusive. So you cannot write about hotels, resorts.
This has got to be bullshit. Elderly, ethanol.
And here's a good one. Peanut allergies.
Female
peanut allergies.
Feminism.
It's forbidden.
This can't.
Death penalty. Yeah.
Yeah. There's no way this is real.
It's illegal to be allergic to peanuts from now on. Yeah.
Sex and race.
This was
insane.
Not exactly this list, but another one was published by the New York Times. So I think this is reputable. And it's only banned, by the way, for like federal grant applications.
It says they're being scrubbed from websites and documents of the government.
Did you see the other story about Enola Gay? Like the first woman or something to fly a plane, like it got flagged at the Pentagon automatically because it had the word gay.
Yeah, Nietzsche's gay science is also forbidden from now on.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't say the word victim.
Connotations change.
Connotations, yeah.
Tribal, to go with Native
Tribal.
American. You can't say tribal or Native
Wow,
American.
I mean, I feel like that might be a place where the DEI people will agree with Trump on that we shouldn't be using the word tribal.
You can't say systemic or stereotype.
What?
You're not allowed to use Latinx anymore. So
Latinx. Yeah.
Latinx, we all celebrate.
Latinx.
We're done.
Yeah.
It seems a little bit, some of these words are very general, like bias,
Low emission vehicle. Yeah.
belong.
Look, here's all the gender ones. Gender-based violence, gender diversity, gender identity, gender ideology, gender affirming care, or genders. Oh my God, female is banned. But male is not. Only male dominated is. Female is banned, male is not.
Yeah,
There's
take that,
a trend
Beauvoir.
here.
Dude, if this were applied, like Jordan Peterson, Ben Shapiro, Prager, they would have nothing to talk about. This is
true.
this is 50% of their material. Right
This is like a word cloud from Jordan Peterson or something. I don't know if this is a banned word list at all.
Yeah, I think it was Marcus Aurelius that said that the higher the degree of the decadence of an empire, the weirder their rules become. And I think this is where we're going.
You can't say the word definition.
We should try one episode with that list in front of us and try to have a normal conversation, avoiding those words. It would be so
Avoid
hard.
the vowel A. It's very limiting without this vocabulary. This is like Urban Dictionary. This is like what you need to understand Reddit, a list of terms. I don't understand half of them.
So weird.
Twitter will become like obsolete in a day.
They put woman and women, like and then they put female and females. Like they got, make sure you put the plural on there. We don't want to leave any loopholes. Like,
For people to abuse the system. Yeah.
That's why we say, racisms. We have to say that. We have to publish a book about racisms while this list is going.
You are allowed to say male, but you're not allowed to say men. Men is banned.
I see men on there. Men right above mental health, and men who have sex with men. That's what you're not allowed to say. The whole phrase is banned.
Sorry. Okay, I made a mistake. It wasn't men. It was men who have sex with men. There's a line break there.
Can you say men that make love to other men? That's okay?
Well, you can't say...
guess so.
I guess you are allowed to say men, but you cannot say woman.
I think this list is exhaustive, so yeah.
Woman is banned, and women are banned.
Say away.
Awesome.
And feminism is banned too. So
put it on the signature of all your documents, just like best regards, Diego. P.S. Men who have love making with men.
Yeah. Are we still allowed to be an Orientalist podcast, or is that banned as well?
Orientalism is allowed, it looks like.
Good. So we have survived another week.
Yes, we have.
Well, yeah, Marxism is allowed on this list too, apparently, but I think they didn't think that one would be a problem.
No, they want to be able to criticize it.
This is an ideological unity list, right? This is an imposition. This is exactly what, one of the fronts of the ideological battle here. I think one of the actual goals of Trump is, this ideological conformity with his vision of the future.
All right. Well, why don't we wrap it there?
This list is a perfect example of that too, right?
We can say he, him, but you cannot say they, them.
Oh.
The language police works for both sides.
The language police works in mysterious ways.
I love you, my fellow men.
Double language agents.
All right.
All right.
See you, men who have sex with men.
All right. Later.
Bye, guys. Cheers.
Bye-bye.